Welcome to this week's DevShares Dev Hangout. This recording is brought to you by the Beyond Bitcoin crew. We welcome all DevShares members to join us weekly and discuss the latest news, updates, and developments. If you'd like to participate in our next meeting, then please join us live on Mumble every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Did you know the Beyond Bitcoin show now has a registered delegate? Please consider voting if you find our hangouts and recordings useful. The delegate name to vote for is fuzzy.beyondbitcoin. Again, that's fuzzy.beyondbitcoin. The Beyond Bitcoin crew would like to send out a big thank you to everyone who's already voted and allowing us the opportunity to serve the BitShares ecosystem and our valued community members. So once again, welcome and please enjoy the show.
Today is Friday, January 23rd, 2015. You're listening to another Beyond Bitcoin Hangout with Bytemaster from the BitShares DAC and with Faddat from Dawn, a new modular computing company. With that said, we normally start with an update from Bytemaster on the BitShares project. But today we're going to start with Faddat introducing a little bit of the concept behind Dawn and how he envisions things going on the hardware side.
Okay, so what we're looking at is a progression in computing. Everybody knows everything is getting smart, and it's getting smarter faster. So we've done a good deal of development work and also a good deal of networking. And today we're able to say that we can produce two products. One, Phoenix. Phoenix is, I think, what we're calling an app stick or a TV stick. It's a computer on an HDMI stick. There are others like it out there. Difference with Phoenix is it is totally open source, and when you buy it, it comes with a repository of ROM images, meaning that it can be repurposed in about a minute. The router, Mammoth, is something I'm really excited about. Routers serve as gateways to internet access. If you had a Mammoth router, you would be far more able to serve apps onto the internet. That's because on today's internet with IPv4, routers get a real IP address, and everything behind the router doesn't really get a public IP address at all. It's translated into something that can reach your computer. Mammoth is aiming to solve that. Mammoth is aiming to bring the Hyperborea platform to more people's computers and support MadeSafe on a more native level than is possible just through one PC. If you've got MadeSafe on your router, it means all the devices behind your router also have MadeSafe. See, Fuzz mentioned modularization, and I suppose I'll just jump into a little preview of what we're going to be doing over this summer. In 1 week, the co-founder Dawn and I, me and Dan, we're going to move from Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, where we basically, we came to Ho Chi Minh, we were basically running out of China. And the reason for that is the Chinese internet control. It got really bad when we had product and there was no feasible way we could sell it. So we made arrangements with our suppliers in China to handle logistics, and we ran here. Now, we always wanted to have a Vietnamese vendor of products, and we were able to find one recently. So we're going to move to Hanoi, and over the next 3 months, we're going to retrofit this factory. There's a guy, he's got a factory that's capable of producing boards with the Intel Broadwell BGP platform. It's not released yet. This is not like desktop Broadwell. It's the Atom Broadwell that will be released in the summer. We're going to go there and handle the ERP and logistics side of things because every device we make is different. What I mean by that is that when you buy one of these, you can choose the firmware it comes with. Now, this intentionally enables rebranding. Okay, I do want people to rebrand these devices. And we actually just put together a page generator. Makes it really easy for people to create a portal, a landing page for their customized version of Phoenix or Mammoth. Now, in the summertime, we're going to produce modules. We're not going to make router boards, TV stick boards, and laptop boards, and what have you. We're going to make one board. It'll be the size of an SO-DIMM, which, guys, if you don't know, that is the size of laptop RAM. On that SO-DIMM is going to be an Intel Broadwell Atom processor, 4 gigabytes of memory, that's 4 gigabytes of RAM, anywhere between 8 to 64 gigabytes of flash memory. What I'm saying is it's a computer on a module. That's actually what they're called, COM, computer on module. These modules would be interchangeable, and because we're not using a data interconnect, instead, we're connecting things in an analog fashion so that when you plug this module in, you're not plugging in a bunch of data interfaces. Instead, you're making analog connections that go, say, to the USB port or what have you. What this allows us to do is create swappable modules. We will hopefully also be producing ARM modules too. So for the first time, you could, well, if you bought a router body, which you would clip the little module into, you could run it with an Intel or AMD processor, and you could easily swap things in and out of there. If you're a hardware manufacturer or you have a product you want to make, well, what you do, you buy our modules, use them however you'd like. The module will be completely open source, and we're going to document the processes that we use at the factory. We want it to be as transparent, as open as possible. And one of our goals is to clone the Hanoi factory in West Africa within 2 years.
That sounds like an incredibly amazing business. Open source hardware is something that I've recognized a need for. Your router would be amazing to combine with .P2P and the BitShares network. What I'd really like to see is everyone have a full node at home and have their light wallet on their desktop and other platforms connect to that full node so that they have trusted validation without burdening every device with synchronizing with the network. And there is so much potential for hardware devices like that. Everything from that to hardware wallets. It sounds really exciting. One of the things you were talking about before we started recording was how you're going to make this a crypto equity company, or more or less have a very diffuse ownership system where every partner, employee, and investor has the opportunity to buy and trade stake in your open source hardware business. And
That's right.
I'd like to share a little bit about how you might want to consider the approach of BitShares for what you are doing.
Please, I'd really like to hear about it.
So BitShares views itself as a blockchain company. I created the metaphor decentralized autonomous company about a year and a half ago. And that has really driven all of our major design decisions. So what does that mean? That means that we view people, the crypto coins, as shares. We view inflation as dilution, basically raising capital for a capital, just like you would do for multiple rounds. You dilute the previous shareholders in order to raise money to fund growth. We believe that the shareholders are in control. They control policy. They vote on who the board of directors is. We call them delegates. There's 101 spots. We wanted very diffuse controls. So we have approval voting. So the top 101 people by total shareholder approval are the ones that are responsible for securing the network. Or not necessarily securing the network, but producing new blocks, including transactions, validating transactions. That's their role. Now, what we did is those delegate positions can also receive pay. The amount of pay they can have is variable between 0% and 100% of the maximum pay per slot. That's also approved by the shareholders. So right now, we're relatively small. That's limited to about $2,000 a month. But by the time we get to the size of Bitcoin, each one of those delegate slots will be millions of dollars a year in capital that would be flowing into them. So they basically each turn into a small business in their own right. What this does is it allows us to fund development without having public good problem or the problem that Bitcoin faces. Bitcoin's been trying to fund development of new features, and they have to rely on donations. Donations where some people sacrifice a lot and gain a little. And it sort of creates the trap. Well, if someone else pays for it, I get the benefit. I'll let someone else pay for it. We also don't want our employees to be forced to say, well, do I donate my time to make this project better? Do I work below market rates? We don't want them to face that challenge. They should be paid what they could earn on the market because that's the value that they, in theory, could be providing to the blockchain. So we're really trying to align economic incentives for all parties. And we have a product. The BitShares product is very similar to a banking product. We lend dollars, gold, and silver into existence backed by collateral. In our case, we make the collateral the BitShares equity itself. It'd be like borrowing dollars from Bank of America backed by Bank of America stock. That gives us a very robust market with established business model completely on a blockchain. It's proving very successful. We are able to fund development at a rate of about $2 to $3 million a year, even today. And if our market cap grows, the amount that we can fund for development grows with it. So that's our overall business model. Now, one of the things that's key to this business model is a very diffuse distribution of the assets. When you have approval voting, if one person owns a very large stake, then they are in effective control. And from a regulatory perspective, if you look at things like real estate investment trusts and so on, it's very different, legally speaking, when you have very diffuse ownership from very centralized ownership. And so I think that's critical to the success of these systems from a legal perspective. So what we've really created is a company that specializes in transactions, and we're going to be using these transactions to do all kinds of things, everything from voting in provably honest elections to domain name registration. That's entirely decentralized, as well as eBay-style markets, peer-to-peer lending, you name it. If it has a transactional model, is information-based, we are going after it, including a full scripting environment eventually. So that's what BitShares is doing. Perhaps our biggest claim to fame is the bit asset system, bit gold, bit silver, which solves the volatility issue and creates trust-free, counterparty risk-free digital assets that can be transferred in seconds. They actually pay you an interest rate, a yield, and they're all on a blockchain. So that's what BitShares is, how it can be used for someone in your position is you can clone the software and create a network for your own business that's more or less self-contained. It's got a funding model. It's got a means to hire people, to self-regulate, and even establish an internal currency based upon dollars, gold, silver, you name it. It's a company in a box.
Ask a question about currencies real quick.
Sure.
Has anybody developed a basket currency yet? Because I want to do that. I would like to keep our internal accounting in a basket currency.
Bid assets can be used to track anything, including a basket. All that's necessary is for someone to establish a price feed for it.
Interesting. Because currencies are going to be more volatile. It's just a fact of life, I think, at this point. Countries seem to be trying to outcompete each other to reduce the value of their currencies, and it's going to have some crazy effects. So if we can get an advantage from our currency system, well, we'll take it. Now, as for cloning, why would I clone your software as opposed to running in the instance that already exists?
It's a good question. I was wondering about myself. Why you pitched it that way, BM?
I was only pitching it that way from the perspective of having 101, if he's creating his own company with his own control structure, and he basically needs all the features, and we don't quite have the ability to have a DAC within a DAC. That said, if you wanted to create a user-issued asset on our network, you can do that right now. That asset can trade against everything else in our system, which means you could get full advantage of everything we have. And you could use it to pay people. It will even support the ability to have proposals that can be voted on by the owners of your asset. The one thing it won't give you is the automatic hiring and paying of people. You'd have to figure out some method of distributing your asset to the people and to employees, figure out who has issuing authority. On the BitShares network, issuing authority is voted on by the shareholders, and user-issued assets, you could still have proposals and still vote on it. Maybe I'll look into a way of automating voting for issuance of new shares under a user-issued asset scheme. It'd be slightly more centralized. So I think there's definitely benefits to being on the BitShares network. If you're on the BitShares network, you get the benefit of all the liquidity, all of the user base, the bid assets that are trading on our system. You're not trying to compete with us, you're working with us. All those things help us both if we can figure out how to work together. I was just trying to provide you the most open approach.
Not to interrupt before Faddat speaks, though, what would be keeping them from maybe issuing the user-issued asset as kind of a placeholder to get everything going, and then when the functionality is potentially there for them to run their own, essentially DAC, the users could use those tokens, the user-issued assets, and turn them in for the new token in the DAC. Is that possible?
Yes, that's entirely possible. And that's actually the way I would recommend anyone thinking of starting something in this space go. Creating and maintaining a DAC on your own is a lot of work, a lot of expense, and a lot of maintenance. So you definitely want to avoid that if at all possible. I think our philosophy, our goals are aligned. I think we have tools that solve a lot of things that you want to do. And it would be very, very exciting to work with you guys on bringing your hardware solutions to the BitShares ecosystem?
We would like to work with you guys too. So, yeah, the most obvious thing is hardware wallets and network liberation kits, which is basically, a router that connects to multiple internets. That's definitely something I think that we're going to see this year. There's not going to be the internet any longer. There will be internets. I saw that there were some Chinese users here. They know about that. They're behind a genuine splinternet. Now, let's forget for a second that the Great Firewall is absolutely evil. And instead, let's focus on what it has implied in China. How did you solve it? What did you do? I'm curious, because my issue was always I couldn't get it going fast enough. We needed, true internet.
Just so this is for all the listeners, BTS Wild Pig.
Oh, okay. We tried that, and basically our issue was speed.
Okay, Faddat, real quick, this is the first time you've been on here, so this is expected. I'm going to try to read these questions, so anybody who is unable to attend can listen to this after the fact and get the information and know the questions that were asked, and then go ahead and answer, okay?
Okay, sure.
So the first part was you were talking about BTS Wild Pig said that he already had solved that issue with a smart router, and you said that you were curious how he did it because it wasn't fast enough. So then he says a router built in an SSH portal. You just need to purchase a VPS account. Go ahead.
How frequently does that crash, BTS Wild Pig? Or how frequently does the firewall detect your SSH tunnel? Actually, GFW is one of it's a type of issue that we're trying to address. But what I was actually going to say about China's internet is, guys, it's very good. They have a high-quality internet with just about all the services that we can imagine. The interesting thing is it's parallel. It doesn't really work. It's as though there are two totally separate internets. Problems are being solved in different ways there, and it's forking. But I don't think humanity should be forked.
What do you mean by that?
Okay, because there's very little contact. No, they don't do that, Riverhead. Although you can almost call it that. The censorship is so pervasive now. You can't access Google in China. It's been that way since, I think, June 2014. And, it's a huge problem if you're in China and you're dependent on Google and what have you. Where are you? Because it's different in different places. And I had issues using SSH. I was in Shenzhen. And before that, Jiangsu.
I think the main thing is that we need to free ourselves. I had a blog post where I talk about the true nature of decentralization, and that is the irreversible public record is what matters. That's what enables all the freedom creating technology. And so long as we allow any infrastructure to get in the way of individuals being able to contribute to an irreversible public record, which means that if the record is censored in any way, like they do in China, that is also a problem. So we certainly need to establish our alternative networks that are as decentralized as the information that is on our blockchains. And having hardware, open source hardware, is a good first step in that direction. I made the analogy of what it would take to make Bitcoin work at a minimal, or BitShares. Imagine you had a radio station that broadcast all around the world, and people had receivers all around the world. That creates a public record. In fact, it's so public that thousands of years from now, you can still receive the transmission in space, and you can't change the transmission after it's been broadcast unless you can figure out how to create a new transmission that's faster than the speed of light. That's the core of what we need to create information that establishes property rights. Now, being able to broadcast then is the choke point. How can we allow everyone the ability to contribute to that official broadcast channel, and to do so in an established order that we can all come to consensus on with a deterministic set of rules? That's what Bitcoin is. So having hardware and an alternative parallel internet is part of the solution to making sure that we can maintain our freedom. We know that it would be trivial for China with their great firewall to block all connections to the BitShares network or the Bitcoin network, and that would absolutely fragment the network. It'd also be trivial to track down every single person who tries to connect to the network, because as much as you may hide behind a firewall and routers and VPNs, your IP address is still ultimately communicating with the network. The way the data is flowing is flowing through the network. So all the public nodes, all the seed nodes that people connect to, anyone who's on the public network, your IP address is known. The governments of the world know exactly who is using Bitcoin and BitShares for the most part. But we just need to make sure that we create the technologies that make it relatively easy, if possible, to hide your participation and to safely participate from jurisdictions that are more friendly to this technology. That said, I'd like to segue away from the hardware front and into status update and where I'd like to see BitShares go in the next month or two, if that's okay. Now, I'll let you say one final thing before taking over.
Oh, please do. I've posted the Dawn roadmap in the forums, and anybody can have a look. Those are our plans for the next year. Thank you all for listening. All yours, Bytemaster.
Faddat, real quick, if you could stick around for after the hangout too, I think it might be helpful for the community to chat with you a little bit.
I'm hanging here.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead, Bytemaster.
All right, so latest status. This past week, I have witnessed a fully functional lightweight wallet in Nathan's office, and that I'm very excited about. We are not quite ready to release it yet because we'd like to enhance some of the backup features and the wallet key generation strategy. But it is fully functional. It's able to send and receive transactions without having to download the entire blockchain. It's extremely resource efficient and very fluid. The UI is a little bit crude and minimalistic at this point in time, but it gets the job done, and I'm super excited about that. So I would expect that sometime within the next week or two that Nathan will have enough polish on the lightweight wallet to release the first beta version of the lightweight wallet. We're very excited about that. One of the things about the lightweight wallet is it's being designed with a UI that could run on a phone. Because it's based on Qt and Qt runs on phones, we hope to convert it to a phone app sometime in the first half of this year.
Riverhead is asking if DevShares can get a version so they don't have to wait.
No, releasing any version, if you compile it yourself, you still depend upon a server to be set up and running somewhere. So releasing any version at this point would just slow down the development process and force us into a maintenance mode. But DevShares will get it first before BitShares. So when we do release the lightweight wallet, it will be a DevShares lightweight wallet first, and then we'll go from there.
Can you talk a little bit about what it would be connecting to and what kind of services a delegate can provide to support it?
All right, so a lightweight wallet connects to a server, which is running the BitShares client. I don't know if Nathan's added any other software on the server aside from just the BitShares RPC API. So we require that server it registers the account for you. So it's also a faucet. So you don't have to go through any other site to do so. So that's the main thing, is you'd have to host a server and be willing to pay registration fees. By default, the wallet is only going to be hard-coded to talk to a server provided by Nathan, but we're figuring out a strategy that will allow you to point it at any server you like. As soon as we do that, then users will be able to point it to any delegate who would like to offer the service. So let's talk a little bit about the trust model of the lightweight wallet. You control your private keys. You create all transactions and you sign all transactions. But you depend upon a trusted, authenticated server to provide you with the mapping from account name to public key, as well as to inform you of transactions and balances. What this means is, if the server is compromised and they get the server's key and they can start signing transactions from the server, they could give you bad address lookups and send money. Basically, you think you're sending it to one person and it ends up going to the attacker. Or they could tell you you've received a transaction when you haven't actually received a transaction. Those are the two things that it can do. We're looking at adding some redundancy so that the lightweight wallet will check with more than one service provider. That way, if one's compromised, you can detect that if there's a disagreement, you should probably check that out. So the question was, how does lightweight client protect against man-in-the-middle attacks? For starters, the client knows the public key of the server and verifies that key as part of a handshake. So the only way to compromise that from a man-in-the-middle perspective is to compromise the initial software that you downloaded. The idea is to distribute the software through something like an app store. The opportunity for man-in-the-middle is much less than distributing it through a website. Obviously, it will be open source and anyone can compile it themselves and anyone can download it if they are confident that they're not being man-in-the-middle. The lightweight client's designed for ease of use. It does compromise. It's slightly less secure than a full client because you're not getting the entire blockchain. It does not do the simple payment verification with Merkle trees that Bitcoin does. All proof of stake systems have a real challenge providing lightweight verification, particularly in something like BitShares, where the structure of the data and the wide range of potential operations that can happen don't lend itself to easy, provable state. You might be able to prove that that was the state at one point in time, but can you prove that's the current state and that nothing's happened since? I think that each and every bank that you deal with has the same issue with man-in-the-middle attacks, but we don't see them getting compromised at the SSL level very often. And there's lots of steps you can take to prevent that. So if you want convenience, it's there. It's there for convenience. If you need security, you have to pay more. Right? Security is always a trade-off between being easy to use and cheap and being hard to use and expensive. And if you try to make something secure and easy to use, it gets very expensive. So in this case, the expense is maintaining the full node, taking the time to download the full chain, the disk storage, the bandwidth, the CPU usage. You have to do all those things to be as secure as possible. But we don't really need as secure as possible. We need security that is good enough for what we're doing. And the way I view it is, if you're going to do a large transaction, you better be sure that you're on a network you trust and that you've got software you trust. But never do a large transaction on a new network with new software. And I think as long as you follow that rule, you'll probably be okay. Someone made the point about Ethereum doing the lightweight validation. Yes, I am very much aware of the way Ethereum's doing it. I've read Vitalik's latest blog post. They pay a very heavy price to do that, to Merkelize every single state update. And even after they've done all of that really hard work, the total gain that the average person gets is very, very small. So you pay a very high price for a very small gain for the concept or the theory of perfect security.
Does Merkelizing this essentially add a lot more blockchain bloat or cause a lot more distress on the system? How does this cause problems exactly?
Yeah, so if you Merkelize everything, that means that you need to recalculate the Merkle tree for the state that changed. And if the state changes are random, that means you're going to have to recalculate a large part of every Merkle tree. Now, they've done some optimizations on this process, but it's a lot of hashing operations that is really going to slow down the processing time and increase the resource requirements. It cannot be done asynchronously because you need to include the result in the header, which means that you'd have to be able to do the whole process in less than 10 seconds to account for every change to the network. And you've got to be able to keep up in real time. You might say, well, we'll only update the Merkle hash once every hour, but now you no longer have the speed of verification because your lightweight client can't validate something that happened 10 seconds ago. Yeah, so basically there's a trade-off. You have to do checkpointing. You have to, a light client, if all it did was download our block headers and validate them, would take a very long time. Our network is mostly empty blocks right now, or blocks with very few transactions. And it takes a long time to validate that and to download just the headers. So we want to avoid that. And I think we're taking a slightly different approach to cryptocurrency, crypto equities, and that is to use the to use trust where it makes sense. I've used this analogy in the past, but if the more you demand complete lack of trust, the higher costs get. If you can't trust anyone, the logical conclusion is that you need to have 3 or more lawyers approve every contract you do with everyone, and you have a contract for everything. That's the logical outcome of the trust no one mindset, and that is incredibly expensive. Business slows down, society gets poorer. On the other hand, if you can do business with everyone on a handshake and verbal agreement, the cost of doing business falls dramatically and everyone's much wealthier as a result. So if you take a very pessimistic view on the trust model, then you, by necessity, are creating very high costs for everyone in the system. And it's not a linear thing. Costs grow exponentially as trust decreases. So you get less and less return for more and more paranoia. I think in general, people can be trusted. What you need to do is avoid situations of debt. I had a blog post. I guess I haven't published that blog post yet. That talks about the difference between trusting someone for information and trusting someone to pay off a debt. You can be the most trustworthy person in the world, and you can lack the ability to pay off a debt, but you always have the ability to tell the truth. And that is a big difference between the two models. So why banking can't be trusted is because it's a debt-based system. And it doesn't matter how much you trust Bitstamp, if they get hacked, you lose all the deposits. It doesn't matter how much you trust a gold depository. If they get their gold seized by government, well, you're out of luck, even though the person you trusted didn't actually violate your trust. They were just incapable of defending the property. So I think we need to leverage trust. And this is what BitShares gives us. It gives us 101 people that have a form of trust that is hard to acquire and maintain, and that we can use and leverage that trust model, the trust model of delegates, to provide services such as lightweight clients. And when it comes to information, a little bit of redundancy on who you ask goes a long way. Another factor in being able to trust the servers providing the lightweight information is that they can get paid to propagate your transaction, or you can pay them. If you're paying someone, you can trust them a lot more than if you're not paying them, merely because if they violate your trust, they stop receiving payments. So if you have many different servers that you pay to provide you with information, then no one of those servers is going to give up their secure, honestly earned income for fraudulent gains, because it's, fraudulent gains are one time, and afterwards your reputation is mud. You are ruined. The losses that you would incur would be unimaginable, especially in a society that is well connected with good information. Furthermore, a server can be bonded. That means that the money can be set aside in advance in case anyone loses money as a result of the server lying to you. And it's this bonded trust that gives you a form of insurance that the server won't lie to you about small amounts. And then there's also the matter that unless you're doing business with the server, it's got no stake in the outcome of your trade. So it has no incentive. It can't steal from you when you're doing business with someone else. So it has no incentive to fake, hey, you received this payment, but no, you didn't really. So you're unlikely to get false reports of payment received unless you're actually doing business with the provider of the lightweight client. In that case, it's generally good to have an independent third party. So this is all public. The blockchain's public. If, in theory, a lightweight client provider can make all responses that it provides people public, I don't think that we are actually giving people absolute trust. Incentives are aligned such that it's perfectly viable. Another analogy I use is we trust major corporations every single day to produce things like our food and our computers, and they handle millions of dollars. No one complains that the corner drugstore is not decentralized enough. You go in there and you do business, and you pay cash, and it's real easy.
But they have a lot of oversight.
Everyone has oversight. So a server, a lightweight client talks to, is being checked up against by other people. There's basically random audits. Anyone can audit them at any time, and they won't even know they're being audited. So given that the probability of getting caught is 100%, they are unlikely to even attempt. So this leaves only one avenue of attack, and that is the server is trustworthy, the operator of the server is trustworthy, but their server itself gets hacked. Their keys get compromised, and the attacker starts producing bogus information. This is no different than a hack of an exchange or a hack of your bank. In that event, your protection is checking with more than one server. And a hacker is unlikely to be able to hack more than one service at the same time. Of course, the more services you check with, the more bandwidth and the heavier weight your client is, and probably the more you'll have to pay each service provider. But you can scale up your security based upon how paranoid you are of any one provider getting hacked. That kind of redundancy actually means that most hackers wouldn't even attempt to hack the server and steal funds that way, because they know that they won't be able to get away with it if all the clients are checking more than one server. So it's really about making it so that the attackers have nothing to gain and the service providers have a lot to lose by lying. If you have those two characteristics, the network will be plenty secure from an economic point of view.
Daniel Sant is saying that he disagrees that your validation for X, Y, and Z are rather projected.
Say that again?
Daniel Sant says that your validation for X, Y, and Z are rather projected.
What do you mean by X, Y, and G?
And Z. Could you explain a little bit what you mean? For instance, the convenience store example. And just for those who are unaware, Desant is actually working with the Dawn project as well.
I'll just go ahead and comment while he's preparing his thoughts. Not all examples are perfect. When you're in a convenience store, you're trusting the merchant there that when he sells you a gallon of milk, that it's not watered down and that it hasn't been opened or been tampered with, and it's got, that it's a legitimate gallon of milk. He could lie to you, and he could sell watered down milk. Your recourse, of course, is law enforcement, and you catch him because, hey, this guy committed fraud. The main issue is you know who he is, you know where he works, and you've got physical evidence. Our trust model is relatively similar in that you know who the provider of the service is. They should be a public person who's taken responsibility, should be someone who's prepared to compensate for any compromises in their own security, and who has a lot to lose if they lie and a lot to gain if they tell the truth. And that you don't rely on just that one person. Convenience store operators are more honest if they know that you can go to the store next door if you're not providing good service. It's the same kind of phenomena.
It's a matter of incentive.
Right. Now, at any point in time, you can go into the convenience store, and while you're there, the store can get robbed, and they can take your money while you're there too. Does that mean you don't trust the convenience store operator? No, he's perfectly trustworthy, but hey, he can get robbed too. So when you do business with someone, there's a difference between trusting the person you're doing business with and knowing that you're doing business in an environment that is protected against outside threats, whether it's the government or a criminal. If you want to have really strong gated setup where you're sure no one can come between you and the person that you're doing business with, that's more expensive than other solutions where you don't have, security bars all around you when you're doing the transaction. So his question is, what if they do things you wouldn't notice, like add addictive substances to the beverages? Well, that's an example of, do you do business with them? Do you trust them not to do that? If you don't trust them not to do that, then you do business with someone else. If you wanted to prove that every single thing they sell you does not have addictive substances put in it, that means you'd have to pay for a lab to test every single product you bought from someone, and that's very expensive. It comes back down to trust is cheaper than security. And then you have to find a compromise between, are you trusting the seal? Is that good enough for you? Are you trusting the label on the front? Is that good enough for you? Every single security measure you add can be compromised in one way or another. Even full nodes, in theory, can be compromised with a very serious attacker. And at the extreme case, the elliptic curve cryptography can be compromised. It's all a matter of how expensive is it to compromise and how much is your loss and how much are you willing to pay to be perfectly secure.
So to paraphrase this, you're saying that it's a balancing act, and that you believe that relying on trust whenever possible is going to be more cost effective and is going to make a more efficient system overall.
Right. For example, let's go back to the monetary realm. You walk around with paper money in your wallet in small amounts because, in theory, someone could rob you and take your money. You'd have no recourse, but it's a small amount. So you have lower security over the money in your wallet than the money in your bank account. The paper money itself is only so secure against counterfeiting. Someone can create a convincing replica and you probably won't be able to detect it, even though the banks could. So there's always that risk when you're dealing with paper money, but it's super convenient. If you were going to run every bill you receive from someone through a machine capable of detecting whether or not it's counterfeit, that would obviously increase the cost of transactions. And in fact, your customers would probably be unwilling to do business with you because of the impact of that on every transaction. It's all about where you are on the spectrum between being paranoid about security and wanting convenience. And the light wallet is somewhere in the middle. It's checking with more than one party. So if any one party is not trustworthy, you're not compromised. And if any one party is hacked, you're not compromised. As long as at least one party is trustworthy and unhackable, then you know that you've done a proper lookup of a key. It's also entirely possible for the person who you're doing business with to give you a couple characters from their public key as a double check. So if you are extremely paranoid, you can say, all right, I got this. I'm about to send you this money to this account. What are the last 5 digits of your public key? They give you that. Now you have a high degree of confidence that someone hasn't man-in-the-middled your key lookup. Given that, you create a transaction and you broadcast it. It's either going to be a valid transaction that goes through or you're not going to lose your money. And it's only going to be going to the person who you think it's going to go to. So there is no risk whatsoever of loss if you are that paranoid about man-in-the-middle attacks against the light wallet.
Arhag asks, he says here, I assume the lightweight client beta to be released in the next few weeks. Will it only work with non-Titan transactions for now? Also, will it support voting on delegates with BTS?
Light wallet does not support Titan. primarily because it would have to scan every transaction in order to receive everything. And the mail infrastructure isn't reliable enough at this point in time to replace it. That said, I talked about this last week, Titan does not provide perfect privacy. Your accounts still get linked. If you register an account or you do certain operations that reference your account, you can tie it, your voting preferences can link your account. So privacy is extremely hard to maintain. What we're doing is we're going to treat accounts like named public keys. If you want to maintain privacy, you can create local accounts and share public keys like you do with Bitcoin best practices. We are looking at ways of enhancing your privacy, but we don't want to create false privacy where you think your accounts and your records are private, but anyone who knows how to do a little graph analysis can figure out exactly how much you have and who you've sent money to.
Crypto Prometheus asks, will it eventually be possible for a lightweight client to contain full market functionality, like buying or shorting of bid assets?
Yes, the lightweight client will be fully functional in time. It's going to start out like our full wallet did without market support, but it won't even have delegate voting support initially. In time, it will be fully functional.
If you don't mind, there's a couple of questions from the Chinese community that I'd like to ask, because we're going to be winding down at some point relatively shortly. And now that we're on the topic of wallets, the first question is, which version of the wallet will improve the current voting system so that all cold stored BTS or exchange BTS can be voted? I
believe that those features are going to be in the next hard fork version 0.60.
Okay, number two is there a limit for the number of 100% pay rate delegates, or is it 101?
It's 101.
3, most of the 100% delegates have been working on, most of the 100% delegates have been working for more than 1 month. However, few of them are reporting the progress. For example, the promoting posts on Reddit or Twitter by a marketing team were not successful. The forum users don't know the progress or achievement they have made if they don't report regularly. Should we make some rules regarding this?
Yes. I think any delegate at any time should be called out on the spot to prove their value and their contribution to the project. We must remain vigilant at all times that we do not have free riders. This particular topic came up a little bit in the Bitcoin talk threads, where they were suggesting that people would get voted into delegate positions and then just do nothing. And my overall response to them was that our inflation rate is less than Bitcoin mining rate. So even if all delegates got 100% pay and did nothing, it's still better than mining. But obviously, to the extent that we can make sure that people are actually working and putting in time, we do better than Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin isn't necessarily some standard, but if Bitcoin can get to $10 billion, then we can get there, even if it's not perfectly efficient. Voting and group projects is never going to be perfect or ideal. There will be inefficiencies, and those inefficiencies are what I call the cost of doing business. That said, we must work to minimize them. We must demand accountability. And anyone who doesn't demand accountability doesn't provide a means to be accountable should be called out and or fired. If there is a major case of this, I will remove my support from them. I cannot monitor 101 people. No one individual can really monitor 101 people. So it's really got to be a situation where I really like the buddy system. I have someone who's paying me and they're running the delegate. If I don't get paid, I'm going to whine. And the person who's paying me should be following up to find out, am I actually doing anything? And they can withhold payment until the community concludes that, yes, I am doing my job. So I highly recommend that all delegates set up a buddy system where the delegate that's receiving the money to begin with is responsible for certifying that the person's actually doing the work and providing the transparency required. And delegates that don't operate on a buddy system should be carefully scrutinized, because we're asking them to audit themselves and without an established auditor. I definitely think it'd be good for some community members to be vigilant. I think any large stakeholder has also got reason to be vigilant on who's doing what.
I agree. Do you think that the polling that BitShares vote will enable would be helpful with some of this?
No, low voter turnout is, we already have voting and polling based upon approval for the delegate position. So adding another layer of voting is not going to help.
Sure.
I think it's just a matter of convincing people to withdraw their vote if you don't think they're doing a good enough job. People can't get page views or conversions, and they're not doing very good marketing. On the other hand, marketers can do their job and not get conversions because the product sucks, right? So if you're trying to sell a pile of cow poo, doesn't matter how good your marketing is, you're not going to sell many, and you're not going to get many conversions. We need to recognize that the marketers themselves have some spin-up time. They start out with this trial and error process. Our marketing team has grown significantly in sophistication with the process of we're actually tracking metrics now. We now know how many people are coming in. We're tracking conversions. We know who's actually getting referrals and getting people to sign up accounts. This is only going to improve as we get more data. We can say, all right, we grew by this amount each month. These things worked, these things didn't. And we're working on making sure that data is available for people so that we can actually measure people's performance. So that has been the primary focus of a lot of the efforts, is doing that. So we're doing our best. Everyone needs to remain vigilant. If you see someone who you don't think is pulling their weight, let's get them fired. Obviously, we don't have unlimited budget, so we need to spend the money that we have as wisely as possible as a group.
Is there a way that somebody could potentially, without having to make a sock puppet account, would there be a way that somebody could potentially whistleblow on a delegate without having to give their information? Because the one issue that I can see us having to deal with on this would be somebody who might be a competing delegate or somebody who wants to be a competing delegate, fearing calling out another delegate because they don't want to be seen as causing conflict or discord in the community, or because of potential ties to big stakeholders that other delegate has within the community.
I think that people need to speak their mind and own up to their opinions, and that we do better by stating our minds and being public. We don't need to create additional means behind, anyone can create a new sock puppet account, but why should someone listen to a sock puppet? We should listen to someone who's actually got some reputation. We only have so much of our attention that we can focus to evaluating these things. Evaluating accusations from sock puppets or new anonymous accounts, people don't trust the accusation and it doesn't get what you want. Delegate positions are going to be very sought after positions. It's going to be a case where those who want the job should be trying to outbid other delegates who currently have the job. And everyone should make sure that no one else is getting a free ride or getting paid for doing inferior work. So I think delegates should be very upfront in critiquing one another, and the delegates that are not actively critiquing each other are not doing their job. So that means that if you have two marketing delegates, they should review one another. And now maybe they could collude and both give themselves a glowing review, but it's far better to have them to risk the collusion than to have an agreement of, all right, we won't criticize each other. And that's sort of an implicit collusion to make it easier to get away with things. So delegates should call out each other.
You characterize the delegates that are out there right now, BM, as being pretty much a cohesive community, in that there's a friendly attitude about calling one another out. I know Xerox and Riverhead are very good about being above board and communicative about what they're doing, and if they make a mistake, which is very rare, I haven't noticed those guys making any mistakes myself. But if they did make a mistake, Xerox or Riverhead or these other types of developers, for example, would probably be very conciliatory, and they say, well, yeah, I think Riverhead lost a feed, or not a feed, but he lost one of his delegate positions. One of the delegate nodes screwed up when you were doing a changeover at one point, and it didn't take him very long to get on top of that, and it was rectified quickly. So I don't think calling people out, as you're pointing out here, is not something people should be afraid of. It's something that should help improve the community's security by just knowing that we're covering each other's back.
To your point, Tom, we have a Skype group for delegates that a lot of people participate in, and it's exactly as you say. When a delegate starts missing blocks, or maybe is double signing, the Skype group sends out the alert, and we try to get a hold of the person, and it's not in an accusatory fashion. It's this person is having issues. What can we do to get them on the case as soon as possible and help them resolve it so that things get back to normal and they start making money again?
Can you tell everybody who is a delegate who's listening to this how to get into this group? Is there a certain person, like a contact point? This is Riverhead who spoke. So would you be one of the people to contact, or is there anybody else?
I forget who invited me, but I'll post a thread about it in the delegate sub forums on the forum on BitSharesTalk.org.
Sounds good.
Someone asked the question, what about the agility of our approach? Well, when you try to do anything as a group, you're less agile than doing it as an individual. That's why I generally prefer individual approaches versus group approaches to solving problems. So it's just we need to be as agile as we can, but as decentralized as we can. And there's going to be costs associated with being decentralized, and that's just the price we pay. But the benefit we get is robustness. If someone has a problem with their node, okay, maybe they miss blocks, but there's 99 other people ready to go. We got people working around the clock to maintain the network. So if there's a problem in the United States that cuts off our internet, well, the network will continue with all the Chinese delegates. And we've got delegates all around the world. So I think that we're as agile as we can be. It's actually an argument for not adding more than 101 delegates. The more you add, it just reduces the agility. The more people you try to track and keep records on, the harder it is to make sure they're doing a good job. If we were to have like a single president that everyone elected, everyone would be watching their every action and call them out and stuff. When we go to 101, it gets harder because we're diluting our ability to police. So that's where there needs to be this compromise between decentralization and centralization for both efficiency and ability to police. It's also a huge strength of our system that we can release an upgrade and have everyone upgrade within 24 hours. You can't do that with proof of work systems. We know who we are. We're an extremely agile blockchain, probably one of the most agile blockchains out there. So I have to commend all the delegates and everyone involved for their work that they're doing.
Do you know what happened to the BTER account? I just received that, Bytemaster.
All I know is that there are some people that are tracking down that, and I think somebody has a pretty good idea who the person is, and we'll see what happens. I don't want to be in the business of policing accounts. That's entirely too arbitrary. One thing I do want to do is if people should burn on their wall, do a negative burn, so it can start to get some negative reputation. And we need to upgrade all of our clients to start showing the burn totals on various accounts as a warning sign. I think that's about all we can do there.
Sounds good. Well, with that said, let's end it for now. We can reconvene next week, same time, 10 a.m. Eastern on Friday. And I would like to ask everybody who feels like these hangouts are beneficial to the community to consider voting for the new fuzzy.beyond Bitcoin delegate. And I would also like to open up at some point in time some more conversation between Descent and Faddat. And with that said, thank you, Bytemaster.
Thank you.